Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, a good distance from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. And everyone who sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. And it came about when Moses went out to the camp that all the people would arise and stand, each at the entrance of their own tent, and gaze after Moses until he entered the tent. Whenever Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses. When all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would arise and worship, each at the entrance of his own tent. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, just as a man would speak to his friend. When Moses returned to the camp, his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. In our worship time today, we have experienced the glory and the presence of the Lord. And I'd encourage us today to remain on in that place, even after the service is gone, even after the music is finished. Be a young man, a lady, a person who chooses to remain on in the glory of God. What did Joshua do in that tent? Maybe he was a server, maybe he swept up. Maybe he went and adjusted the curtains or the paraphernalia in the tent. Maybe he just sat with his head in his hands, pondering what he'd just seen. Maybe he just lingered, hoping to catch a residue. Maybe he was just, there's no other place he'd rather be. Joshua, a young man who would remain long after the meeting was over, long after the glory had gone. I don't know if you've ever been into, but we certainly in the Lake District have been into some outdoor pursuit shops. And you go into these shops in the Lake District and there's all sorts of things on display to buy, to purchase. And they are all sorts of things to do with keeping warm, keeping dry, climbing, orienteering, things to keep your maps dry, rucksacks, watering cans, all sorts of things you can purchase. You go and peruse them, sometimes you put them back on the shelf and say, very nice, but not for me. Other things you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to take that looks really, really handy. My message today is a shop where you can peruse and you can look at all sorts of things on display today. You might decide, very interesting, but not for me, and put it back on the shelf. But I hope that for some of you, it will be life-changing and helpful for you today as you purchase, and it will be a great help. What I bring today is not authoritative. Do not take it as authoritative, as scripture. It is fallible, it is my own thoughts, and you are quite welcome to think otherwise. But I have brought these thoughts a few years ago, and I thought it was just some of my own silly thoughts. But I was really, really hearkened, because apparently it came up in the discussion at the youth group last Friday. And Nathan came back and shared with me. And apparently, what I'm sharing today made a real mark on some of the young people a few years ago, to which Sandra would wax bona fide everything I say as, well, you said it was quite life-changing for you last week, didn't you, when I chatted with you? And it's you feel it's something that can really assist you in your future in possible politics or whatever path you take. So I took great courage with that. As I said to Nathan, I said, that's really amazing. That's what I'm going to be sharing on this coming week. So the design of this message is really two things. One is to help us navigate modern morality. And the other is to try and assist us in the future days and helping us understand what we call and what the Bible refers to as end times. End times. And so what I have today, I'm really hoping will be a helpful aid and something that will help you to navigate and process the days we're living in. Many of you I know of are as excited as I am about doing jigsaws. Jigsaw people, yes, give us a wave. Love doing jigsaws. And the thing with the jigsaw is that you have a picture and you then spend many hours completing the jigsaw according to the picture. And you can see all the factors on the picture and all the things that you're meant to be doing and the design of what you're creating. But what happens when you have a jigsaw that has no picture? Now this is interesting, isn't it? The picture is completely blank, but inside is all the pieces. How do you do a jigsaw that has no picture, but it has a list of facts? It has instructions. It has key elements to look out for. Well, we all know what a corner looks like. We all know what an edge piece looks like. We could probably somehow get together and do the framework. On the list of instructions is some key things. It says there's a red tractor. It says there is an oak tree, and it says there is a cow in a field. But it doesn't tell you about the slight changes of hone or tone in the blue skies, or the hints, the changes of hints in the greens. And it doesn't tell you about the changing of effects in the brickwork of the old farm barn. But you still have to somehow, you know that the pieces are there, you know the factors are there. The Bible tells us a lot about the future and about the end times, but we have no picture. All we have is a list, we have patterns, we have types, we have prophecies, we have given facts. Something's very clear, but we have no picture. And so we have a jigsaw to put together out of words and things that we piece together ourselves. If I was to choose a character to illustrate something of what I want to portray this week and subsequent weeks, it is the character Joshua, from which I have just read. And Joshua, we have just found out that as a young man, he had a heart and set on the things of God. And unlike many, many, many other characters in the Bible, we find him still having a heart after God at the end of his life. One of the few. And here in Joshua chapter 24, we have the very, very familiar verse which we will be very familiar with, which declares he's giving his farewell speech, having led the nation of Israel into the promised land and conquered all the land for the children of Israel. And he gives a farewell speech, and these famous words, well-known words, are this: you choose who you are going to serve. But as for me and my house, we are going to serve the Lord. Wonderful words. And here we have this man who, right at the beginning of his life, longed and just lingered in the tent of meeting, the place where God's glory came. And right at the end of his life, he's saying, look, I am about to move on. My days are numbered now. But I want to say that my house are still going to follow hard after God. And so I look at this man, and I look at this character, and I look and I see one particular word. And the word I see is direction. I see the direction of a man, and I see the direction of his life. And that is something I want to allude to today. We live in a day, the last 10 years particularly, where morality and its definition is changing rapidly. In the 1970s, 80s, I beg your pardon, in the 1980s, a survey of 73% of people recognised that sex outside of marriage was wrong. In the 1980s, 73%. I don't know what, it'd be interesting to know what it was today. I think we could all probably make an intelligent guess as to what percentage would agree or disagree with sex outside of marriage. What has happened? There's been a change, there's been a big shift. For those of us who are older, an older generation, our generation and older didn't have to answer many of the questions that the generation today is having to answer. It was pretty much set in legislation, law and culture that certain moralities were wrong. Not really questioned. If people didn't like the morality and they carried on, then it was their choice, but they probably had a basic regard that it was actually wrong, but they enjoyed doing wrong. And so our generation didn't really have to address these issues, it was just wrong, and that was it, no questions asked. But we live in a generation where this recent generation is now having to face questions where what we used to call wrong and no questions asked are now being really, really probed, and what was regarded as wrong is not called wrong anymore, and in many cases actually called right. And so we have a culture that is changing, and it is on a journey of a destination. I just want to throw out a whole lot of things for us for a moment, and hopefully out of the confusion I'll bring some order afterwards. Someone recently said to me that they are having to write an assignment for the Church of England. And the question of the assignment was this: does the proclamation of the gospel conflict with the state? So I got talking and I said, well, that's interesting, because we've always had an assumption, obviously, a basic assumption, that wrong and right are opposite directions. We've assumed that wrong is one way and right is the other way. It's fairly obvious, and in many cases that is the case. Wrong is very wrong and right is very right, and in many cases it is very obvious that they are diverse and they are opposite. You turn one way for wrong and another way for right, and some things are very clear like that. And we assume that they are wrong and right and opposite. What happens, though? What happens if wrong and right are the same direction?
Bad news.
Going in the same direction, wrong and right. Interesting. So a few years ago, I remember doing a study here, and we talked a lot about sexuality, morality, gender issues, and all those affiliated subjects. And it was at a time when particularly the church in this country was really having to rapidly come up with answers. Questions were being asked, and we were having to think on our feet very quickly. And there was a lot of confusion, possibly still is some confusion. I think the heat of it has gone out a bit. It's moved on to other subjects. But it's still confused, and people still aren't quite sure what they can say about things on morality and sexuality. And I came across this formula, this phrase, because I felt that the church particularly was all at sixes and sevens about what it was. The phrase being at sixes and sevens, you will well know, is to be in a state of confusion, a bit of a panic, a bit of a rush, not really quite sure what's going on. Oh dear, I'm all at sixes and sevens. I don't know, I'm coming or going. It's that sort of phrase. And then the penny dropped. I thought sixes and sevens. That's an interesting phrase, because in the Bible, numbers are very significant. And the Hebrew language is constructed not just alphabetically, but numerically as well. And certain words and certain letters have numerical numbers to them. In the Bible, we will come across many passages which seem very laborious and tedious because they are just numbers and details of cubic meters and sixes of this and threes of that and sevens of the other and twos of this. And I think, is this really necessary? It's incredibly necessary. We understand the significance of numbers in the Bible, and you can do a great